in 1 Kings 19, Elijah is a prophet of God, and he's on the run from the evil Queen Jezebel, and he ends up at Horeb, which Scripture calls the Mount of God. And he wants to have this encounter with God. And so God says to him, go stand on the mount before the Lord, and I'll be there. And so Elijah goes to stand there, and there's this big, great gust of wind, but Scripture says that God was not in the wind. And then came an earthquake that shook the ground, but God was not in the earthquake. And then a great fire came, but God was not in the fire. And then there was this low whisper. And Elijah covered his face with his cloak, and he stepped out and he heard the voice. And that voice was the voice of God. And I'm a loud person. Never been accused of being quiet. My kids are loud. My dog is loud. He's 125 pounds. You dare to knock on my door and you're going to hear about, like, everything around me is loud. And I tend to surround myself with noisy things. Like, even if I'm at home, I'll turn on the radio or turn on a podcast or whatever it is. And this has been a season of realizing that I need to be quiet. And my kids are older than your kids.
Yeah.
So maybe y'all can't relate to this. I'm sure that your kids are not like this. But when my kids were little and they would be talking loudly with each other, I wouldn't say they were fighting. They didn't do that. But, if there was a disagreement of any kind, I would usually come in over that. Like, if I can be louder than your loud, my loud will make you quiet. And it doesn't, don't do the math, but it made sense to me. And I think I expected God to do that same thing. Like, whatever noise or loudness I have in my life, if he wants my attention, he'll come over that. He'll come up louder than that. And this has been a season of me learning that that's not how God works. Yeah. He's in the whisper. He's in the quiet. And so I've really had to discipline myself to be quiet so that I can, and surround myself with quiet so that I can hear him. And one of the first times I experienced it, this was actually years ago, before I ever went to seminary. I had wrote a children's book, little known fact, wrote a children's book, never got published, and I was devastated because I'd sent it off to publishers, and I kept getting rejection letter after rejection letter, and I remember distinctly sitting at my kitchen table one day with God. The house is all quiet, the kids are at school, and I'm just hurt and disappointed and trying to figure out what he has for me and why this didn't go anywhere, and I heard him whisper, "That's not what I have for you." Stop spending all of your energy on this because that's not what I have for you. And it was maybe 6 months later that he called me to seminary. And so just in that season of him closing one door, and it just felt like, well, what next? He was preparing my heart for the thing that he had for me. And so that whisper of hope was not about what I wanted to do, not the way that I wanted him to use me, but the way that he wanted to use me. And that was such a sweet whisper of hope in that time. But like Elijah in 1 Kings 19, I had to find the quiet in order to hear that.